one of the most significant trends in the U.S. economy is the increasing diversity in the workforce. This film explores how leading organizations go about valuing and managing the richness that diversity brings. In each case, commitment from the top is essential.
Whenever you want to make change or enhance a process of change, I think the key ingredient is leadership. Senior management leadership, leadership from the top.
I set the expectations, and people can sense that I really believe that value and diversity is important. And it's not only important for society, but it's important for business.
My experience over the years as a faculty member, dean, provost, president, is that the president must set the tone for the campus.
I came here in the early 70s and worked with the management team then on a process of fully utilizing the people that we were hiring from different backgrounds. And the first thing that we did is that we identified where did the senior white males that were running the business come from? What did you have to do in Xerox to succeed? We then put a process in place to ensure that women and minorities got those experiences.
Everybody below top management reads not so much what the top manager says, the CEO says, but they watch to see what he does. And they read that the body language and the informal communication far more carefully, and they follow those rules far more scrupulously than any amount of writing something in policies.
We have made building a pluralistic workforce a fundamental business strategy. When you get into a position of power in a company, you have to establish some fundamental values for yourself. You know, what do you want to stand for? What do you want to be? And I decided that this was one of the things that I valued highly and I was going to stand for.
Jack McAllister has set the stage. There's no question about the top commitment in this corporation. And that's the only way it's going to succeed.
We're constantly having new people come into our organization, and they bring with them all the baggage of society. And so we have to continue to educate, and we have to continue to engage in behavior modification where necessary, and we have to continually state what we stand for.
At U.S. West, communication and commitment is a two-way street. A unique group of senior executives from operations in 14 states meet monthly to develop policy, strategy, and programs. This is the Pluralism Council.
We've got Black History Month. We've got the month in recognizing women, the month of the child, gay and lesbian, veterans, religion, American Indian. We've added Pacific Asian, so that the major groups are covered in the present calendar. We have had several suggestions. One is that we add White Maleism Month.
I'm down to where you said the risk of appearing extreme and ridiculous. I think we're headed there.
There is a lot of frustration that the white male is experiencing.
I see it as sort of a get even. Last thing we need to do is facilitate white men getting together. We're born to power and privilege no matter how poor economically we're born.
As soon as some minority groups or protected groups or whatever you want to call them begin to just carve out a small piece of the pie, again, the folks who have the pie don't want to give it up.
Let me add another thing. Do we really have a class system?
If you want to talk about how we discriminate as managers against hourly people, I believe that when I was an hourly person, that I was treated differently, that I was stereotyped, and that I was treated in the classical way that you do when you go about oppressing people. I don't think people like to talk about that. I think as a legal representative of this council, that it makes you very damned uneasy to have me, that may not be true, but I mean, to have us make a statement like that. But the reality is that if you are black and you are an hourly person and you are a female, you've got 3 loads to carry. Mm-hmm. And I think that represents probably around 40,000 people in this corporation.
We're talking here, I think, hopefully about sensitivity to differences. I think that's the real thrust of what we're talking about.
Let's move on and get into terminology. Is the term manhole still appropriate, and should we be calling it what it is, and that is a utility hole?
But I think it is appropriate for us to deal with this language, this sexist language.
Eliminate terminology manhole.
Now, Doc Master, help me with that one.
We had complaint that it is discriminatory, that it only applies to men. My reaction was to George, well, what are you going to do with masterpiece, with master degree, with all those masters that it is ridiculous.
This is a passionate issue with me because language shapes thoughts and shapes images. And Doc Master says to me, that is male. That is male. We're clinging to what is comfortable. And we can say it another way without losing the impact. We're in the marketplace, and millions of dollars depend on how we communicate with the public, and it is critical.
Larry, what are you talking about? Doing away with colors and talking about
No,
anything?
I'm talking about using language in a caring way.
White paper connotes a good paper.
Sure.
Blackball connotes that you're eliminating something for some reason. You blackballed me out of the organization. I didn't get it. And so it's again back to mind perception and what it translates to. When I hear that, I'll be frank with you, it ticks me off.
We're ridding ourselves of the roadblocks, which include bias and prejudice in the workplace that left employees with less than a fair opportunity to show their full potential.
The employees themselves are involved in policy decisions that affect them. Here, the presidents of the employee resource groups have come together to share progress and plans with corporate public relations.
A year ago, we did a story on employee resource groups, and the reaction was not completely negative, but we got a lot of letters, ranging from those that said, why would the company want to help fund these organizations? After all, they're only there to serve themselves. To, why should there be a group for gays and lesbians?
Some fairly hostile responses.
You could take the fairly out. Very, we got hate mail.
U.S. West has done a lot to promote pluralism and promote diversity. However, there is still racism. It's alive and well.
I've talked to many gay and lesbian managers who are just afraid of their jobs and their careers by self-identifying. And it's kind of a catch-22 situation in how do you dispel the myths about who we are when we're not willing to come forward and say who we are, and to start serving as role models.
Self-esteem issues are critical for American Indian people. And we have been victims too long. And as a society, and certainly as the Indian people that I know within the corporation, are not going to be victims any longer.
We've been the silent, the invisible minority, and I think we need to come forward and say we have a tremendous resource within this company that the company can utilize.
I think we've come a long way, but I don't think that any of us have the luxury of being lax and thinking that we've made it, because we haven't.
One of the important aspects of the work that we do as a coalition or as groups is that we continue to introduce our cultures into this culture, that it can be compatible, that I don't have to act like a white European male to be successful in this corporation.
We want to bring what our roots are. We want to bring what our values are. We want to bring what our differences are and integrate that into the system that's already here in place, not assimilate.
We do an exercise in stereotyping and labeling. We put an easel up around the room, and each one of those easels has a name on it, and it represents every one of our groups and more groups. And people go around and they put a yellow sticky with one word on it, the first word that comes to their mind, whether they believe it or not. And for gay, they may put, well, they did put sick. So everyone in the room does that. And I went home and it just hit me. It hit me, all the pain, all the labels that every one of us deal with every day in overcoming, that we've internalized, that we start to believe. And I cried for 2 hours, and I felt the pain.
The corporation loses money with that type of pain because you are not producing to, to your highest level, period.
It's important that we have an opportunity to meet with Jack McAllister or one of the officers. However, when it gets down to, all right, which group is going to be represented, we're not comfortable with that and would like to meet as a coalition.
And they do. U.S. West supports 7 employee organizations. Jack McAllister believes they've been good for the company.
Meet again.
If you looked at all of the councils, the resource groups, we probably have literally thousands of employees who are personally committed and personally involved in some way.
We have all the unfinished work to do, and so I don't want to put us on a pedestal or say that by any stretch of the imagination we're done. You're never done with this work, and it requires constant maintenance and constant effort.
We live in a world which is based on competition between companies, competition between countries and locations. Being successful in the business is dependent on having a qualified workforce. Capability of the people is your most competitive advantage. And if we are to have the workforce of the future adequately prepared, we've got to engage more fully in improving the quality of education, and we've got to engage more fully in providing opportunity for our current employees, and particularly for future employees. So that we're very concerned about having a flowing pipeline of people who are adequately trained. I personally have had a kind of an ongoing interest in helping young people. And it comes to me, I think, quite naturally on the basis that as a young person, I was particularly shy. I came from a good, solid family with strong parents who hoped a lot for me. I was an eldest child, but I wasn't much of a student. And I'm just one who needed a lot of intervention from a lot of sources in addition to my parents. In my case, Boy Scouting helped a bit. And intervention along the way, both educationally and once I got into my career, people trying to help me make decisions was very significant to my life. And I believe virtually every young person needs some level of help. I don't think anybody, quote, makes it on their own. We at Kodak have historically given a fair amount of our resources to scholarships. The challenge is the pool from which we draw to give those scholarships, we believe, is not expanding rapidly enough. That's got us saying, well, we better start working at the high school level because they didn't quite get out of high school with enough training. A key sorting class for any young person is 9th grade algebra. The child who does not take 9th grade algebra has made a fundamental life choice. They don't realize they've made that life choice, but they've in fact made a life choice. And it isn't a life choice that says if you don't take algebra, you can't be an engineer. It's if you don't take 9th grade algebra, the world's just filled with things you can't do. Well, how do you assure that every child takes and is successful in 9th grade algebra? Well, you have to start that process down in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, so that's what's driven us lower and lower in the education process.
Kodak participates in joint business efforts to enhance educational opportunities for young people in Rochester. Kodak executives act as visiting teachers in classrooms. Education is so important to Kodak's president, Kay Whitmore, that he meets personally with engineering and business research staff to review programs such as PRISM, program to interest students in science and math.
My impression of PRISM has been, it's been tremendously successful with a few kids. There'll be the normal percentage of kids who want to be engineers or chemists or physicists or whatever, and there'll be some of those qualified kids who will be journalists and social scientists and writers or whatever. But it isn't to try to drive everybody into a common mold.
We're not under the illusion that all of them will be scientists or engineers, and they really shouldn't be. So what we're doing is using science and engineering principles as the medium to get at the kids.
And we feel, too, that if one of the kids decide to be a breakdancer, he'll be the most empowered breakdancer, and, you know, and because of the exposure that he's had to the program.
Most kids at that age have the attention span of a fly. So if you're sitting there in a math class, they don't care about all these formulas a lot. But what PRISM did for me is it took and it made things more concrete for me.
You cannot recruit for the very best casually. You've got to be there when the very best make their decisions. The very best don't make their decisions on where to go to work the day they graduate from college. The very best get identified early in their career, and they get recruited earlier in their career. So you give scholarships to people earlier in their college career, and then work actively with them in terms of bringing them here, work for summer work, let them get acquainted with the company.
Recruitment is only a beginning. Competition for talent means companies must work at retention.
The major issue of retention tends to be around your best people because they're the most mobile. They're the ones who have the most opportunity. If you're not careful, you tend, on average, to retain the lower half of your population. The best half of your population move on if you're not actively working at it. If you don't give those people a sense that they're fully engaged, they're part of the team, and that they have a future.
The newcomer, the woman or the minority, I feel, is always in an accommodating role because they're trying to fit. It's the group that's receiving the newcomer, in my mind, that has to do most of the accommodating. And that's an important process that we have to help in.
Buenos días. Ustedes todos son de Puerto Rico. Yo también viví en Puerto Rico por 3 años.
We are trying to fill the pipeline with talented women and minorities. And in order to do that, we have to stay in touch. Management has to be seen.
Maybe. Rajinder, how's your Spanish?
Not very good, but I can speak in Hindi.
That's right. Between the two of us, you have a fairly good spread of diverse workforce here at Kodak. And I thought
Phil Samper, vice chairman of the company, takes time to meet new hires from the University of Puerto Rico.
And the term ganas, which all of you understand, really just says it all. Ganas, the desire to succeed. That certain something that makes one individual do better than another individual, even if they're equals intellectually. And we think a lot of the minority and female population has more ganas, and we want to try and tap those ganas. Now, if you're a woman coming into this company, the first thing you're going to ask is, how many women do you have in management? If there are no women in management, and you're a talented young woman who is being sought after by other corporations, you may not go to work for that company. So we have to establish role models. I mean, fortunately, I can get up in front of the group and say, I'm Hispanic, and I haven't done too badly in this company. I got up in front of a rather large group of Hispanic employees and said, you're looking at a failure. Because when I was in high school in Los Angeles, I was in a club, we called it, but it was the equivalent of a gang. It wasn't quite as violent as you might find today in the streets, but they were pretty tough kids. And we had gang fights and things like that. Then I got expelled from junior college. So my message to them was, it's never too late. You can turn around your life. You can be successful. The key to success in our efforts in the area of diverse workforce is to keep people. We have a process of management development that's ongoing. It's ongoing for everyone. One, we identify top high potential people. We track them, we work with them, we mentor them, we coach them. We try to move them up through the ranks as quickly as possible.
Hey, Kathy, I'd like to spend a few minutes with you talking about Everett. And I'm not sure he sees the long-term game plan for him at Kodak. And what are your thoughts on what we can do to maybe get him a little bit more energized around a career, long-term career with a company?
Yeah, the thing that we need to do is get to his supervisor and ask John if he will lay out in more detail what exactly we're going to have Everett do over the next 18 months. He's got two possible career objectives. One is to try to be the general manager of a business unit. The other one is an opportunity in finance. So we want to expose him to both paths. My recommendation would be that we start now to position Everett for an assignment in one of the manufacturing installations in finance.
So we're pushing people up through the ranks. We're taking more of a risk in some cases because you have to. Based on our experience, I'm getting more and more comfortable with the risk because I'm seeing people rising to the challenge. So is it a risk? It's a risk. Is it a major risk? I don't think so.
We have a culture that's worked very well for us for 107 years. And most other corporations can say the same thing if they've been successful. They say, are we going to go out and risk messing up something that's served us well for decades and even centuries? And what's going to happen if we change the culture? Is it going to alienate the existing workforce? Is it going to take away autonomy from managers? Is it going to create morale problems? Is it going to be expensive? We don't know right now. We just know that we've got to deal with these issues of diversity.
Dow Jones has been a company where managers have had a great deal of autonomy. Women and minorities sometimes felt cut out of the old boy network, and career advancement was a slow process.
It isn't easy being the only woman. It isn't easy being the only black. It isn't easy for me. It never has been, but the organization has a responsibility to that person to make sure that they are given the opportunity to feel comfortable.
Dow Jones management has committed to doing just that.
I was hired with Dow Jones 13 years ago in the position of the assistant production manager, which is traditionally a male role, and subsequently became the first female production manager in the company in a 100-year history. There are now 3 female production managers, I'm happy to report. How many pages tonight?
46.
46. How are things going, Kim? Pretty well. Good. It was intimidating to be a female in that capacity 10 years ago, in a job where traditionally men have held that position. It's very difficult to know the ropes, to know the inside, to get into the loop.
White men very often have mentors informally, people that would sort of, senior managers who would take them under their wings and guide them sort of through the corporate maze and teach them really the ins and outs of how to get ahead in the corporation. We decided to create a mentoring program where we would have one mentor who would be a senior level manager and 3 persons who were being mentored and reflect a diverse workforce. One of the 3 would be a white male, 1 would be a minority, and 1 a female. And since there were 4 people in each group, just to have a catchy name, we call them quad squads. The specific objective of the quad squads was to get them to understand how the corporation functions, to find out how better to get ahead in their careers.
If you look at certain people's career paths within Dow Jones, you'll find out that they've had a job, at least one job, one place or another, where they've had a lot of visibility, particularly high visibility. And whether it's a Peter Kahn or myself or any one of us, somehow managed to be in that job that had a lot of visibility.
It really helps having someone like Virgil to help us see where we are. And when all that reorganization started, I was able to go to him and say, you know, can you give me a perspective on this? Is this good or bad? Or, you know, it gave me someone to turn to.
I think Virgil has used his influence to get us some tours of different places, and he obviously has a good knowledge of the company. So we've been able to get some company level awareness.
Matter of fact, I'm the mentor in one of the quad squads. We started this as a pilot program with 5 groups, and overall, it's been very positive. The feedback we get from those people who've been involved is that it's worthwhile doing. It seems to be accomplishing a lot of what we expected. Everything going in here? Good. That's good. You have a nice lunch? So you got a presentation this morning on
A message was sent from the top to all managers outlining specific actions to promote full participation and advancement of women and minorities, including an expansion of the quad mentoring system. The memo stated that mentoring is part of Dow Jones' definition of management.
Unless you have a program or method to enforce activity to deal with diversity, it's not going to happen. We're not talking about really scary stuff here. And so, you know, if we're wrong about the impact of the entering workforce and the demographics, you know, and we do these things anyway, it's not going to really kill us. As a matter of fact, it might end up helping us anyway.
What were you thinking about when you just kept saying yes?
The activity companies consider a necessity anyway is management training, and cross-cultural training is nothing new to the major multinationals intent on competing globally.
He made a mistake, and now he's just saying, I'm sorry, and he's leaving me with the problem.
These companies have been among the first to move from legalistic presentations on EEO and affirmative action to training in valuing and managing a diverse workplace.
Okay, what we have on the feedback handout was timing is very important. So don't give up. If you want to make a point with me, say, Doug-san, I've got to talk to you, this is important, and talk about it right then. Don't wait until later. Good afternoon, Kashima-san.
Good afternoon, Doug-san.
The reason I asked you to come here today was I wanted to check on the status of the memo that I asked you to give to me by today.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't understand you clearly.
You didn't understand?
Yes.
Well, I talked about it in the meeting on Monday.
Yes.
And I asked everybody to get it to me by Wednesday, and it's 3 o'clock Wednesday. And you don't have the memo.
I'm sorry. I'm very busy installing some new equipment, and it is very difficult for me to write quickly in English.
Well, why didn't you tell me that in the meeting? I said, does anybody have any questions? Nobody said anything. You could have told me then.
Because, Doug-san, I didn't want my subordinate to realize how poor my English. I'm sorry, I forgot it.
You forgot the memo?
Yes.
Companies like Procter & Gamble have spent years designing, pilot testing, and rolling out major training programs for all levels of managers and employees. The programs are as diverse as the subject of diversity, but all experts agree that training worth its salt involves self-awareness.
Saying valuing difference is one thing. Doing the work of valuing difference is something else. And the work, for me, of valuing difference is internal. It's dealing with my difference, my understanding of myself. It's not your difference. I have to value your difference, but to do that, I have to first understand who I am and what I'm about and how I think. And that takes real work.
A first stage in the valuing differences journey for me was to get in touch with a broader range of issues, to get beyond the race issues and to take a closer look at what some of the gender issues meant to me. I began to understand that I must build partnerships with white women. I must build partnerships with white men. And then, of course, I must build partnerships with Hispanic men and women, with Asian men and women. When I began to understand it's not just race and gender, it's about our sexual orientation, it's about our perspectives with respect to ability and disability. So we began with a small core group of people, 7 people, who came together to just talk, to have the dialogue. Over time, as those people met, they managed to develop some trust with one another. They began to discuss some of the issues that normally don't get discussed in the workplace, issues such as styles of bonding, intimacy, what is intimacy, love. We began to discuss issues of forgiveness, taking risks, and making mistakes with one another. Those of us who are black and white, we began to understand that the issue for everybody is by whose standards, yours or mine. And we slowly began to understand that our culture, our core identity issues help us form our assumptions about the standards. Difference in assumptions can develop into some difficult situations at work. A man and a woman trying to build a working relationship can go at it through different bonding styles. The man can be very indirect and can begin talking about sports events or maybe even making jokes, and she's thinking, what a bore, or here I have to put up with more sports, not understanding that that's the way he thinks that he builds a relationship. She, on the other hand, can say to him very directly, oh, I like you. And he immediately says she's hot for my body. It's that kind of a difference that can create problems. We have so many things we're trying to figure out about how to do the work. So as valuing differences managers, we come together on a fairly regular basis.
We know it's good for people, it's good for the company, and I think most people believe that, but we need to balance that with our discussions around how this work makes us productive, how this work gives us a competitive edge, and how it enhances our profitability in some real direct kinds of ways.
What I always struggle with is how do you get people to understand what this has to do with them being successful in their work?
Right. What's the preparation?
And if someone doesn't realize that, If that's simply not part of their reality,
Yeah, I
then
agree
the
with that.
first step is not that you force them into a core group or you say this is the way you need to become a better manager or supervisor. You find other ways of getting them to see what it has to do with them.
Valuing differences is really about learning. The thing that keeps me doing this work for the number of years that I've been doing it, which is a white male I'm often asked about, is that I continue to be a student. I continue to learn more and more about others, about business, about this world, but maybe most importantly about myself. That I know more about me because of valuing differences than I ever understood before.
There is nothing like personal experience for changing attitudes and behavior. Each year, a number of Weyerhaeuser employees go through a week-long series of outdoor exercises designed to build teamwork and leadership skills. Here in the wilderness, men and women learn to respect one another's abilities. River rafting is just the beginning. Before these people are done, they will go through a variety of simulations, including rescuing a man drowning in rapids and maneuvering through minefields.
It's amazing how people pull together and take seriously the consequences of what's going to happen if you don't team. And maybe what's really important is going back and communicating to everybody why it's so important and you know, how serious the consequences can be if we don't team together.
That's what was so exciting is in an exercise with a potentially all-male physical situation, we went through some stumbling and we found some ways to make it work.
I think a little bit of faith comes into play, and I heard a couple people say it. You know, we did things today that by yourself you'd never dream of doing, but if you're with people and you're getting support from these people and you trust them, it gives you that incentive to try and do it.
One of the first things that I felt when I was going down there was, oh my God, I've never done this before. And I don't know these people, you know, they're from all different places, and I don't know about this. I was really somewhat. I was scared. Yeah, I was scared to death. I Right. remember it. But people on the boat told me what to do and when to do it, and they drew me out when I was sort of reserved and not sure whether or not I really wanted to do this.
Even though your role may have been what you thought was small, the role of many people together created this end result, which in fact was overwhelming.
That can thrive and
Facilitators
prosper.
introduce the subject of diversity. Inevitably, the campfire chat brings up mixed feelings.
Becoming a diverse workforce is one of the goals for the Forest Products Company. There are a lot of good candidates that exist out there in the world. And as I interpret it right now, the approach is, well, you go out there and get them and bring them into Weyerhaeuser Company. And I'm not so sure that we know how to do that. It'd be nice to see an example set by someone before us.
Every woman that we try and place, force fit into the organization, who doesn't work out, makes my job 10 times tougher. Not my job as an HR manager, my job as a woman. And that's true for a minority candidate. And
The people that already have those prejudices built up, it's just it's another flag, you know, for them to raise and say, "See, I told you so."
If you've got enough people that are looking at you saying, you're a woman and you're going to fail in this particular job because, that's not a woman's job, then, after a while you'll say, yeah, I'm gonna fail. So, might as well give up.
You set them up for failure in the dumping mode rather than the...
And so the talk goes on. People sharing and listening, and it's not all positive. Companies like Weyerhaeuser that value diversity accept the reality that their employees bring different feelings about diversity itself. The challenge is to build trust and relationships that mean better teamwork back on the job. Government agencies and universities, too, are seeing the necessity of diversity programs. For example, San Francisco State University.
About 55% of our undergraduates are, in fact, ethnic minorities.
Out of our 29,000 students, something like 6,000 of them were not born in this country. So we have to work hard at getting a diverse faculty and staff that represents that population. We've been rather successful in the last 2 years. Something like 42% of our new faculty hires this year were minorities, and something like 65% of our new faculty hires were women.
20 years ago, in 1968, a group of students had a strike that took 6 months. They were black students who were joined by Third World Liberation Front students and faculty. And at the end of the 6-month strike, we had a Black Studies department. Since that time, there are now in the country 350 Black Studies departments and Asian Studies departments and Mexican American Studies and La Raza Studies departments and American Indian Studies departments and Ethnic Studies departments. Here at State, we have the only master's program in ethnic studies in the country.
The students are here to learn, and staff are routed into training as part of their jobs. One group that has most resisted training all across the country has been faculty.
The question really is why faculty, amongst all other groups, resist change as much as they do. Faculty do see themselves in a way as kind of the last of the local entrepreneurs. They resist any attempts on the part of presidents or anyone else to tell them what to do or how to do it. Getting faculty to change their curriculum is like moving a cemetery. There's a very famous grocery store over on Broadway in Cambridge that is frequented by a number of faculty from MIT and Harvard. A friend of mine reports that one day a young professor was seen going through the line that said 5 purchases or fewer, and he had about 15 purchases in his basket, and the clerk said to him, is it that you're from MIT and you can't read, or you're from Harvard and you can't count? And this faculty member said, no, I'm from UMass Boston and I resist all authority.
At the beginning of every semester, we do an orientation workshop for new faculty. We have done them for faculty, for staff, for the administration, and eventually all the facets of the institution will be affected. They're designed to eliminate campus racism, to have a faculty and a staff that's very sensitive to all sorts of differences. San Francisco State is probably one of the most progressive campuses in the country, but yet we've had these incidents around the campus. One report from a class was stated that blacks really were pretty pleased with slavery. They ate every day and things were not really so bad for them. This was a statement made in one class. Another report was that lazy black slaves goofed off a lot. This was a statement made by a student in the class, which was allegedly not corrected by the faculty member. It's difficult to change, but you can. You have to force yourself to see a potentially brilliant person when you see a person of color walking in the door. Literally force yourself. If someone comes walking in with an earring in his ear or some style of dress that may look different to you, force yourself to see this person as a potentially brilliant person with a history of centuries of brilliance behind him or her. You must not only listen to yourself, you must monitor others. You aren't going to be very popular, but it's not enough for you to just acquire this information and change yourself. You have to try to help others. I want you to join me in a conspiracy to change the attitudes of this whole school. So every time you hear a negative statement, someone says, oh, those Maldonados are dumb. You say, oh, no. I had Jesus in my class last year. He's brilliant. I don't know where you're getting your information.
Keeping talent also requires organizations to accommodate employees with special circumstances.
We're trying to treat people as individuals, not making assumptions, bringing people into decisions that affect them so that they can tell us.
Companies, and this would not include GTE, get nervous about creating precedents that wouldn't apply across the board in absolutely every situation. And a company has to be innovative and forward-thinking to be willing to assess people on an individual basis and assess each individual situation to determine whether or not an accommodation would work well. When my supervisor was faced with the fact that I had to be put to bed immediately, very, very early in the pregnancy, he was faced with a tough decision to make, whether or not it made sense to accommodate me and set me up at home, or to resort to the old traditional policies and programs, which is like reading you the Miranda rights, you know, congratulations, you're pregnant, you have the right to X number of weeks at full pay and X number of weeks at partial pay, and after that you have X number of weeks to come back to work. If you do come back to work, you're entitled to this. If you don't, you're gone. GTE decided to provide me a personal computer and a fax machine, as well as a speakerphone and a telephone line from my computer back to the office. So the amount of equipment is minimal. And when you look at the cost to the company of the loss of a productive employee, the cost of accommodating is far, far less. Good afternoon, Karen Ross. I'm doing fine. How are you? I've been able to be as productive, if not more productive, than I would be working at the office. The first part of meetings, for example, is social before you get into the meat of the meeting. When I'm at home, they didn't patch me in until we're ready for the meat of the meeting. Well, during those 15 or 20 minutes, I've been busy working. I believe that that should be a sufficient group of people to be able to get the implementation team excited. The payoff for the corporation is an incredibly loyal employee. It's easy for a corporation to have a vision statement and a value statement and list words that they care about their employees. It's another thing to put life into those words, and when faced with individual situations, to treat you like a person. Instead of resorting to the old corporate policies and practices that were designed back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s for a different complement of employees, they look and say, how can we make this work?
The objective for GTE is to grow our best and brightest, then to look for reasons why things can work rather than why things won't work. Does it make life a little more complex? Sure, but the end product is improved performance, and that's what we're after.
There are many forms of accommodations, and as more diverse people enter the workforce, there are needs such as dependent care, there are religious accommodation needs, there are physical accommodation needs. People with disability is a large minority group which has been pretty much ignored by corporations in the past. They represent just as many talents as non-disabled population, and Hewlett-Packard actively recruits people with disabilities.
At Hewlett-Packard, employees help determine the needs of disabled people and make proposals to management. These enabling committees, as they're called, have brought about enormous changes. Some may seem minor, most are inexpensive, but all make life much less frustrating for disabled employees.
There are some adaptive devices which can be fairly expensive, but for the majority of the accommodations that we make for employees with disabilities, it requires a little bit of creativity and maybe on the average of something like a couple $100.
The changes they've made in the plant for people with physical impairments has actually helped everybody. We put mirrors up on the ceiling so you can see around the corners. Mainly it was for people in wheelchairs, but short people use them too because you can't see them over the walls. The windows were put down the bottom foot of the bathroom doors, and everybody uses those windows now.
Cutting tables were made specifically for individuals in a wheelchair so that they can really get closer to the work. And it made so much sense for everyone that now it's become standard.
Several Hewlett-Packard plants have instituted an annual Barrier Awareness Day. Here in Santa Rosa, California, the general manager kicks off the program.
Giants come in all sizes, and we definitely have a giant of a man with us today. I'm very pleased to introduce to all of you Mr. Billy Barty.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to talk about barriers.
The objective to Barrier Awareness Day, it's really to develop some empathy. And empathy is a very important competency in dealing with people with disabilities or people from diverse backgrounds. You really have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of that other person before you can understand the barriers, you can understand their problems, and then you can find ways of dealing with some of those problems.
In Rohnert Park, California, Hewlett-Packard employees spin the lottery of life and receive a disability for a day.
Mobility impaired, piece of cake. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Some receive wheelchairs, some are hearing impaired,
Tough to steer.
some go through the Hall of Darkness. All are changed.
I'll be in the back of the room.
You mean if I yell for help? I would hate to be like this the rest of my life, I'll tell you. Walking through this scared the living hell out of me, and I'm still nervous.
Being in a wheelchair all day is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. I thought it would be real easy to move around, and I found out different. I couldn't get the arms of the wheelchair under my desk, and that kept me far away, and I couldn't reach everything that was out in front of me.
Being hearing impaired, people treated me a little bit differently, and they wouldn't talk directly to me. They would talk over me. I felt left out of conversations.
As a result of doing these exercises and going through the Barrier Awareness Day, people really do have very creative ideas on how to restructure a facility. We are all only one accident away from being disabled. While you and I will never be a man or being of a different race than we are, but on our way home, we can become disabled.
Whatever the policies and programs in any organization, accountability is key.
Well, strength is in diversity at Security Pacific. We have a broad range of customers who have different needs, different languages, different economic statuses in life. And clearly, these are our challenges and our opportunities.
Every year we have a joint network reunion to bring people together so that they can share in thoughts and views. But more importantly, the real value is tonight we have 19 executive vice presidents and 7 vice chairmen attending. And these are the same people that I'm trying to ensure have the right values of diversity in the workforce that is so much a part of our institution. How we bring about a positive attitude towards value and diversity amongst our senior managers is of great importance to us. The answer is not to beat them over the head or to try and change their view on life or society, but have them understand that we know what they do with their people in terms of bonuses, in terms of promotions, in terms of training and expectations, that they're going to be judged on how well they get with the program, how well they support the program, not only statistically, but in their actions and in their efforts.
How does he do that? By measuring performance and rewarding those who contribute.
Now we're going to present our Strength in Diversity Awards. Candidates were nominated for their exemplary and consistent support the minority networks. Dale Terrell participates personally and is in full support of the networks. He's coached, counseled, encouraged other officers over the years. Carol Bruce. The last award is our Senior Management Award for outstanding results in promoting women and minorities.
Companies that value their diverse workforce also honor the diversity of their customers, and vice versa. These companies are realizing the power of diverse advertising.
Precios bajos todos los días del año. Por eso en Sears su dinero vale mucho.
But if you ever decide to return something to Sears,
細蚊仔俾我哋嘅。係我哋故事。
These ads sell products, but also reinforce those companies' images as good places for minorities to work.
Traditionally, benefits were designed for the typical employee. But nowadays, it's hard to know who is typical. Today, more and more families have two breadwinners. Many of us are single parents. We change jobs more often, and we're living and working longer. And the traditional approach to benefits no longer meets the needs of our employees. The result is Passport.
And with a diverse workforce, companies are better able to serve diverse customers.
One of the things that Allstate is moving to is to really begin to look specifically at the various cultures and the differences, to have a better understanding of those differences, so that we are better able to understand the needs of the community. Being a part of the Chinatown Festival and being involved in not only talking with the people, but listening to the people and making sure that people are aware of the services that Allstate provides.
When you talk about the needs in the changing economy and the business world that we're in today, the company has to move real quick. This market is a growing market, especially with the Hong Kong people coming in the 1990s. We can't afford not to take their business, because if we don't do it, our competitors will. And that's why we're trying to avoid that problem by being outbeat by our competitors, because we're one step behind. And that's why we're here.
They know you're here. That's the main thing.
You know what? After the end of the day, they're going to see us more than anyone else, because we're giving out brochures, and 1 out of every 4 people are going to have one of those.
Yeah, that's right.
A balloon?
A balloon, that's the main thing. The kid with a...
balloons. You know, this is real good that parents speak Chinese. Let people know that, hey, we do speak Chinese. You know, we don't all speak English. And we can give them the special things that we can provide for them, such as bilingual claim adjuster, bilingual agents, bilingual brochures. Hey, you know, we will grab this market much better than we have in the past.
Okay.
When we think of marketing and customer service, we may think of business, not public service.
A public benefit corporation like the Metropolitan Transportation Authority needs to understand and value diversity in its workforce. I mean, our customers are riders, and we want people to ride our system. We have a tremendous investment in the infrastructure. The tracks are already laid, the tunnels are dug, we've purchased the rolling stock, and the employees are on board. So the difference between what we take in revenues and what it costs to run the railroad has a lot to do with how many people we can attract as customers. If you're going to attract people as customers, whether you're selling rides on a railroad or whether you're selling widgets on the street, you've got to meet the customer where the customer's coming from. You need to have a workforce that's got a sufficient mix of people, that someone with credibility to this audience is there. So if we've got to have black cops as well as white cops, Asian cops and Hispanic cops. We need female cops as well as male cops.
Sorry, I'd like an information about the culture bus. Where can I get that?
Culture bus, you have to ask at the tourist information, which is right over here.
And then we have an express, ma'am. That's the, what is it, the 858, 958?
Being responsive is easier when you understand the customer because the customer is you. We periodically do a study of our transportation service to assure that we are not discriminating against minority communities in the delivery of the service. It involves collecting all of the demographic information concerning the communities which we serve, and of course we go out 100 miles or so in each of 2 or 3 directions, and then plotting on overlay maps the service routes so to see what population lives in those areas and to determine whether or not we deliver equal opportunity and service as well as employment and business opportunities. We don't have to work that hard at getting a diverse workforce. We're going to get it. But we need to work very hard at learning how to manage it effectively. Those who deal directly with the public need special training to be sensitive to the cultural differences. All managers need cultural diversity training, in my opinion. But white males have been, in general, raised in our system to make certain assumptions about life, one of which is that their word is law, so to speak, that they assume that when they say something, it has credibility. And it's very difficult for some of them to understand that in some context, no matter what they say, no matter how truthful, no matter how sincere, it's at least suspect. I, as the manager, want to make it clear that I'm comfortable, and I expect everyone else to be comfortable, discussing the issues of race. I like to say to people, you need to get comfortable using race as a descriptor as you would the color of a person's hair. If you got to beat around as we used to years ago, when I ask you, do you know Bill Jones? And you're going to tell me he's a tall, thin fellow that wears the round glasses and has a curly hair and a ruddy complexion. When I've got to search through, I mean, if you told me he was black, let's say, it eliminates 90% of the possibilities.
Whatever public service or business you are in, communication is fundamental in promoting change. Here we've seen how leading organizations are communicating their commitment to diversity through demonstrating leadership from the top, involvement of employees, investment in filling the pipeline, a wide variety of mentoring and training programs, accommodating specific needs of individuals, accountability systems and rewards, and responsiveness to diversity in the workplace. None of these organizations consider themselves finished in this work.